Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are joined with Maui here, who is 10 months old. At this age he would be classed as a juvenile or sub-adult. Now if you'd like to see his progress so far from a tiny hatchling to quite an active juvenile here, then check out my baby leopard gecko playlist. I'll link that here and below. And if you are new to leopard geckos and want to learn more, check out leopard gecko merch, where I do have an ebook all about caring for leopard geckos. But in today's video, I'll be answering 15 questions you sent me over on Instagram all about raising baby and juvenile leopard geckos. So the first one is, what do you enjoy the most about taking care of a baby or juvenile leopard gecko? So I'd say that I love to see the baby leopard gecko constantly change and grow. Like after every shed, something is different, even if it's subtle. And the thing is, they grow so quickly, it's actually noticeable. It's not subtle, as you can see in this picture of Maui. I take a picture each month and he has changed so much. I also love their enthusiasm for food. They'll literally fly across the tank for prey. Next, would you recommend a baby or juvenile for a first gecko? So I think if it's your first gecko, I'd probably recommend a juvenile, just because babies can be so small and quite flighty, and if you've never owned a reptile before and maybe you're a little bit nervous about the handling, then a juvenile might be better because the babies are so small and so delicate. So maybe a gecko around 5 or 6 months old could be good. Would you consider getting another leopard gecko? I'm quite happy at the moment with 4. Next, we have some health related questions. So what should you do if your gecko doesn't put on weight but acts normal? So since this is a baby and juvenile video, I assume that's what you're relating to. So a baby would gain weight each week. So maybe a gram, maybe 2, maybe 3. That's quite normal. If your baby leopard gecko isn't gaining weight, you might need to increase the food a little bit. What I will say is when Maui hit about 8 to 9 months, he got stuck at like 60 to 62 grams. Active, eating loads, completely healthy. I wasn't too concerned because at this age it can sort of plateau. So I wouldn't be too concerned. What would be an issue is if they started losing weight, if they were eating loads but losing weight. And at that point, it'd be best to see a vet. They can do like a stool test, so they can check if your gecko doesn't have like parasites, because that could be a reason. But yeah, their weight can sort of plateau when they are like near the end of being a juvenile. At what age can you determine their gender? So usually it's like 3 to 6 months old. I can't remember how old Maui was. I know it was earlier than I expected, but one day I looked at him and I was like, he has 2 bulges. He's a boy. And it was very early on. So yes, for a long time you can think I have a girl, and then they suddenly appear, but they can appear quite early. How long does it take for a gecko to reach adulthood? So technically, you can breed them earlier, so that would be classed as being sort of sexually matured, but it's not recommended. I'd say they reach their max size, so what I class as adulthood, at a year or a year and a half. And finally, at what age do girls typically start ovulating? I would say maybe a year or 2 years old. That's what I notice with my girls, but I have heard of people who have female leopard geckos laying infertile eggs as early as 7 or 9 months old. I'm not sure why, but I guess some of them can start ovulating quite early. Next, we have some diet-related questions. So the first one is, are there some insects they shouldn't eat before reaching adulthood? The only thing I would say to avoid, especially with a baby, is super or morio worms, because they're super strong and they have quite the pinch on them. I've only just recently started offering Maui these because I know he can handle them now, but if you compare a morio worm with them as a baby, I just don't think it would be safe. The other one, you don't have to avoid this. It's more because it's classed as a treat. I wouldn't overly feed waxworms, which actually moves me on to the next question. What is the best food for a baby? I've been feeding him waxworms because they're small. Okay, so you can get small sized crickets, small locusts, small mealworms, dubia roach nymphs, calci or phoenix worms. There are so many other better options than waxworms. As I said, they're more of a treat. You definitely don't want to be feeding these often. And if you feed them all the time, they're probably going to turn into a fussy eater. So if you can't find smaller insects in your local shop, maybe look online. There's loads of places that sell feeder insects online, but you can definitely get smaller size of almost all the healthy insects. And finally, how to use supplements and which supplements do I use. Okay, so I've done a couple videos on this, I'll link them below. The first one is where I talk about the feeding and supplementing schedule. It's more of a guide, especially if you don't use UV. Then I have an updated version where I'm using UV. I tell you what I use, how long I have the light on for, and what supplements I use alongside it. So I will direct this question to those two videos. Then we have behaviour related questions. So the first one is, are they more active than adults? Yes, definitely. Maui is always digging, he's always climbing, exploring, especially during the evening. He is full of beans. When I have him out, as you can see, they can move a lot quicker, so they can be a little more flighty, but yeah, they are more active than adults. And why won't it leave its hide when the lights are on? Okay, so this is quite normal. Leopard geckos will generally hide or bask or partially bask during the day. With Maui and Minnie, sometimes they are out and I can see them during the day, whereas here, like Gizmo and Diego are nowhere to be seen. So generally in the day, I just do not bother my leopard geckos at all. I leave them to sleep because I know I'll see them more in the evening. So if you're more of a daytime person and you won't really spend much time with them in the evening, then maybe a leopard gecko isn't for you. And finally, we have questions relating to tank size and setup. So how big should a terrarium be for a baby leopard gecko? Now, I have a feeling I've done a video on this. I set up a faunarium and I set up a vivarium. So you want to see that video, you can check it out here. It will show you how to set up those tanks. When I first got Maui, I had a 24-inch or 2-foot long tank set up for him. But then when I saw him in person, I realised he was tiny. And so I put him in a really simple 18-inch long faunarium setup for like 2 weeks. These faunariums are super cheap, really handy to have around. You do have to use a heat mat with them because there's no room for overhead heating. But if you get a particularly small gecko, that can be helpful. But if you get a gecko that is about 3 months old or more, it can go straight into a 2-foot long tank easily. And with Maui, I will soon be upgrading him to a 3-foot long tank. Next, my leopard gecko likes to climb. Can you recommend any climbing materials? The first thing I thought was cork. Cork is easy to get hold of and it's really good for the leopard geckos to grip onto. You can get branches, you can get flats, you can get hollows. Gizmo will happily climb up her branch and she's 15 years old, so that works really well. And if you can get like a 3D background, they will also like to climb up that too. And finally, for a baby, would you start off with a deep heat projector or should you use a heat mat first? So you can 100% start off with a deep heat projector, absolutely fine. Best used with thick slate, so if you can make your own hide or do what I've done in Maui's tank where there's a pre-existing resin hide underneath the slate just to make sure that structure is secure, that would be perfect. The only reason I started Maui off with a heat mat was just simply because he was in that faunarium. But yeah, a deep heat projector is completely safe. So yeah, I hope this video has helped. We've really got through those 15 questions. As I mentioned, we do have a whole playlist all about baby leopard geckos, so if you want to learn more, check that out. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. But thank you for watching, guys, and goodbye.